Ndi Madekwana, President Ramaphosa. I'm wanting to carry on from where we were last night. I want to start by just quoting a verse from Romans chapter 13, where Paul tells us that the government or the human authorities are God's minister for good to the people. You know, like all of us in South Africa, I think over the last 18 months, we've had an absolute information overload. Good information and lots of bad fake information as well. And that fake information has come from cooks, from conspiracy theorists, left, right, political spectrum. But a lot of it has also come from government and even from a lot of the media. Just as an example, you know, about a year ago, there was talk that the origin of COVID was a virus that was an engineered virus that had got out of a lab in Wuhan. And of course, the Chinese media put that out as fake news, conspiracy theory, and the whole world's governments and media parroted what the Chinese were saying. Well, of course, here we are more than a year later, and we find that that has become mainstream. Even liberal news organizations like BBC News, why the Wuhan lab leak theory has been taken seriously, and the United States Congress are doing an investigation. And so we see how even things that has a lot of merit, claims that have a lot of merit, are sometimes just brushed aside. And all of us are confused. And I'm sure you have had a massive amount of information to deal with as well, with all that's going on in our country. Amongst this, we've also had claims about various medicines, miracle drugs and cures and treatments and what have you. And those claims have been treated the same. Almost without fail, everything is pushed aside. And there's one or two potential treatments that are claimed that keep on coming up again and again and again. And I'm sure one in particular that you know well. It's had wide usage over decades. The inventors, the developers won the Nobel Prize for medicine for ivermectin, for its use in human beings, although it's also widely used in animals. But it's used to treat parasitic diseases such as African river blindness in people. And it's very, very cheap. And even our doctors here in South Africa, many of them are prescribing it. My wife and I are using it as a preventative, and we know of many friends that are using it as well. And there are more and more academic papers and research coming out supporting ivermectin as it's not a miracle cure, but as a very, very successful potential treatment for COVID. And we have these American Therapeutic Journal. If you look at the list of authors there, these are top class, highly qualified medical scientists. And the conclusion was that moderate certainty evidence finds that large reductions in COVID-19 deaths are possible using ivermectin. Just some recent research in Israel, double-blind study shows ivermectin reduces disease duration and infectiousness, and yet FDA and World Health Organization caution against its use. It's also being used in dozens of countries around the world, probably most notably in India, where they were having a massive spike, huge amount of hospitalizations and deaths. And ivermectin in certain of their states was widely used. And whether coincidental or causative, the cases and the hospitalization and deaths dropped radically over a relatively short space of time. And then we have our own academics like Colleen Aldous and others that are pleading here in South Africa for ivermectin to be widely used. And the question is, why aren't we using these drugs at all? And they're continually being written off, and mainly by big pharma, your big pharmaceutical companies, companies like Merck, and of course our own organizations as well, South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, saying there's insufficient data for us to authorize ivermectin. They talk about side effects. Merck put out a statement about side effects. Merck, when they had the license for ivermectin, made over 1 billion doses of ivermectin for human use. And now they're talking about the side effects. Insufficient data, studies not large enough. These are the type of statements that are continually being made. And all the time, governments around the world and our own government, including you, President Ramaphosa, has just been a one-track, vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. And I cannot comprehend the lack of curiosity about these couple of drugs that seem to show so much promise. Our economy is struggling. The mental health of people is failing. Unemployment, deaths, exhausted medical personnel. And yet we are seemingly doing nothing to investigate, to study, to research these claims. We're spending billions and billions on drugs, not only now, but long into the future with, because these booster shots are evidently and obviously going to be needed long time into the future as well. Can't we put aside just a few million rand to do an investigation urgently, establish a commission to look at this research that's been done, to look into how it's been used in various countries, and urgently make a recommendation? And President Ramaphosa, that cannot be headed up by somebody in the pharmaceutical industry or in medicine, anybody with a conflict of interest, because we are dealing, your pharmaceutical industry is not saintly. Over the past few years, that it's estimated that they've paid out, your big pharmaceutical companies, including Johnson & Johnson and others, have paid out about $40 billion in settlements for the role they've played in opioid dependency and addictions. These are the organizations that we are trusting to make these decisions on our behalf. Such a commission would need to be headed by a reputable, trustworthy, maybe a businessman or a judge, without any other attachments, no conflicts of interest to the pharmaceutical industry. President Ramaphosa, we are in a state of disaster. And when a disaster happens, we don't slowly rescue ourselves and our dependents and those that we love. We do things rapidly. And I cannot fathom why you are not rapidly, urgently looking into something like ivermectin. to find out whether these claims are credible or not, and rolling it out. Less than $10 a day to treat somebody, to keep them out of hospital, or to reduce and minimize the symptoms, and even to dramatically reduce the number of deaths, according to the research, much of the research that is out there. President Ramaphosa, Nkosi Sikelele, Africa.